23 Business Management Committee meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written. Properly moved and seconded. Any corrections or comments? Let's go ahead and vote. Valencia, you hit the wrong button? All right. The motion passes. Minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda will star the Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Hurley, who's already come to the lectern. A resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of financial advisory services, RFP P50119. Mr. Hurley.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Durrett, Vice Chair Williamson, members of the MARTA Business Management Committee, and Mr. Greenwood. I'm here today to present for committee consideration a resolution to allow the General Manager to enter into a contract for financial advisory services, RFP P50119. Next slide. Our agenda consists of discussion on the contract need, specific details on the proposed contract, details of the solicitation process, and the Source Evaluation Committee's recommendation. Next slide. The contract will directly support MARTA's Office of Treasury Services. The Dodd-Frank Act requires governmental entities to retain a financial advisor if they are to receive investment and financing opportunities from the marketplace. Furthermore, the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board establishes a standard of conduct for financial advisors that renders fiduciary responsibilities upon the financial advisor, meaning that they're an extension of MARTA and they're beholden to do what's in MARTA's best interests. Additionally, the financial advisor brings value to MARTA by providing expertise and guidance on complicated refinancings like the tender and exchange transactions that we've executed over the last year. So you all will remember those have saved us in the tens of millions of dollars. The financial advisor assists staff in planning and executing financing transactions, identifies potential use of innovative financing techniques, and acts as a liaison with the investment banking community. Furthermore, the financial advisor will coordinate credit rating presentations and investor roadshows and provide accounting support for MARTA's leveraged lease program. These are our railcar lease-leaseback transactions, as well as providing independent pricing on MARTA's fuel hedges and bond transactions to MARTA's external auditors. Next slide. A little about the contract. The contract duration is for 2 years with 3 one-year options and replaces the current contract P36399, which expires on June 30th, 2023. The value of the contract is not to exceed $487,500 for the 5-year term of the contract. The contract presents 2 payment schedules, one for direct hourly charges, which is work for items other than the financial transactions themselves. Examples of this would be audit pricing confirmations, financial modeling, or just generally assisting us with financing questions that may come up. These costs are charged directly to this particular contract. The second payment schedule establishes the pricing charged for the future financial transactions. So what we're doing is locking in the pricing they will charge us over the next 5 years to execute those transactions. The payments for the financial transactions, or for the cost of issuance as it's termed, are approved by the Board of Directors during the approval of the individual financial transactions and are not charged to the particular contract. The DBE goal set for this contract is 25%. Next slide. A little about the RFP process. Competitive RFP was conducted by the Source and Evaluation Committee, or the SEC, with established evaluation criteria. We had 52 firms retrieve the solicitation online. We emailed 9 notices to offers for prospective firms that had expressed interest to us, and 5 proposals were received by the deadline. 3 proposals were deemed responsible and responsive. The SEC conducted a technical review with the scoring resulting in shortlisting 2 firms who were brought in for interviews. The firms were the team of Hilltop Securities and TKG and Associates, who are the incumbent firms. TKG and Associates is the DBE, and Public Financial Management and McCarley Berry and Company. McCarley Berry and Company is the DBE that's partnered with Public Financial Management. After presentations, the SEC was provided the opportunity to rescore their technical evaluations. Then, on March 13th, the SEC met to review final tech scores and pricing and voted unanimously to recommend award to Public Financial Management and McCarley Berry and Company. Next slide. I respectfully request the approval of the MARTA Business Management Committee for the resolution to allow the general manager to enter into contract with Public Financial Management and McCarley Berry and Company for RFP P50119.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
entertain a motion and a second on the resolution. Properly moved and seconded. Discussion. Mr. Pond.
Quick question, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
What was the location of the 2 finalists? Are they here in Metro Atlanta or where?
The PFM has a local office in Atlanta and does business with several entities in Atlanta. Hilltop Securities is based out of Dallas.
Okay.
Mr. Floyd?
Just a few quick questions. You said the DOT Act requires government agencies to do this? Is that, it's a legal requirement, we have to do this?
In order for MARTA to receive financing opportunities from the investment banking community to approach us, by law, we have to have a financial advisor, or we could not entertain receiving those potential opportunities.
Okay, I know local governments have very severe and restrict things they can do with money, investments, and how they can handle it, where it has to be put. Is MARTA under any kind of restrictions like that?
We follow the state guidelines on, and the MARTA Act as to how we can invest or what types of transactions we can enter into. Yes, sir.
Okay, and I guess my last question is about the people involved in this. In my experience with financial help, it deals a lot in personalities and who you get along with and how you relate to them. Are there rules in here if the whole firm left town or something one day, or do we have a way to get out of this or to move or to change it?
Yes, sir. There's the opportunity that we can exit the contract at any time that we would like. That would be more of a Paris question, but I believe we can get out of those as we see fit. In fact, at one point, Hilltop had, the lead for Hilltop had passed, and they had lost some of their ability, so we did bring in a different firm to come help us execute some transactions. Didn't preclude us from using someone else if something like that came up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Then let's go ahead and vote. If my voting screen, there we go, thank you. Resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Hurley.
Yes, sir.
All right. The record will show that. In fact, it shows that on my screen. And we'll go to the next item on the agenda. This is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for investment portfolio management subscription. Contract P42566. Mr. Hurley, you still have the lectern.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Durrett. I'm also here to present a request to approve modification number 2 to contract P42566, which is our Clearwater Investment Management software subscription. Next slide. Our agenda consists of some background into the contract, discussion on the contract terms, and staff's recommendation. Next slide. The Oracle Treasury module has limitations in regard to investment and portfolio management, as well as investment accounting applications. The Clearwater hosted software subscription allows for enhanced capabilities from a single software package rather than bundling multiple software applications that can get expensive. The enhancements include automation of investment reconciliation, automation in generating accounting entries, and expansion of our potential investment pool. Additionally, the software confirms investment compliance with MARTA's investment guidelines, presents investment performance dashboards and graphics, and provides risk analytic tools and risk exposure reports. Next slide. The modification of $193,750 would allow for funding that would extend the existing subscription for up to 3 years in 1-year increments, meaning that each year we have the opportunity to continue with the subscription or move away from it. The approximate annual cost is $60,000 per year at existing portfolio levels. The reason we're little higher than 60,000 is we anticipate our portfolio growing slightly over the next couple of years. There was no DBE goal established for this contract, as it was a professional services subscription for under $200,000 when initially established. And the continued use of this subscription will be further evaluated during the implementation of the Oracle Cloud Financial module. We're going to be comparing any enhancements to that module to what Clearwater provides us to see if this is there's an ability to replace what we're using right now. Next slide. I respectfully request approval of modification 2 to contract P42566 for a total contract amount not to exceed $391,600.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. I'll entertain a motion and a second of the resolution. Properly moved and seconded. Discussion. Pretty clear cut. I'll call for the vote. Is that everybody? All right, Al, you made it on there. Motion passes. Well done, Mr. Hurley. Item 4 on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of storage expansion and upgrade, RFPPP P50315, utilizing the Federal General Services Administration contract. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Chairman Durrett, Mr. Greenwood, members of the Business Management Committee. Good morning. Next slide, please. This morning, I'd like to request respectfully approval of the resolution authorizing award of contract to IBM for additional hardware storage. Think of it as the network hard drive for MARTA, expanding the capability to support the growing video and other data needs that we have. This contract will be executed via the federal GSA administration process, and because it is a federal GSA contracting process, no DBE goal is assigned. In addition, this market has very little DBE participation eligibility. Next slide, please. This contract would buy additional storage capacity on our existing IBM system for an amount of $1,627,795.38. This brings us up to, this allows us to continue to store and keep video for 30 days, process and store all the other data that the systems that we run and operate generate. So this is simply an expansion of our ability to continue to store data at MARTA. So respectfully, I'd request authorization on this resolution to enter into this contract with IBM.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion and a second on this resolution? Properly moved and seconded. Discussion. Mr. Pond?
Quick question, Kirk. The storage hardware is on site and then the backup is off site, correct?
That is conceptually correct. It's a little more complicated that we actually have backups both on-site and off-site because we need to be able to recover very quickly, but should something happen to our on-site, we can pull it from remote locations. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Let's go ahead and vote on the resolution. Whoops, my voting screen disappeared. I got it back, but Mr. Pond is tardy again. The motion passes. Thank you,
sir.
Kirk. Are you still up there?
Yes, sir.
All right. ArcGIS, resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for renewal of our ArcGIS software maintenance. RFPPP P45386. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Durrett, once again. Here presenting this morning, next slide please, requesting authorization to modify our existing contract with Esri Corporation. For those not aware, Esri is the provider of our ArcGIS software. It allows us to map routes, facilities, locations, everything that puts onto a map. And this technology allows us to do analysis, analytics, reporting, even putting together some of the websites that we present out when we display information about our system. We're requesting today an expansion to this contract for a period of 3 years and 2 months for an amount of $160,395.04. No DBE goal was assigned originally to this procurement since it was under $200,000. It was eligible for the Small Business Enterprise Program. And this is a single source, or I'm sorry, a sole supplier for this technology. Next slide, please. We've been utilizing this software for the better part of 2 decades here. We currently have a contract in place at $137,000. This period of time will allow us to continue to utilize this software for 3 more years. And we're seeing increased growth as we utilize the capabilities and we present more maps out. We're moving to a consumption-based model where as people interact with our websites and they utilize maps, the licensing costs go up. Hence the slight increase in funds for the 3-year period of time. But today I'm requesting approval for this extension of the contract in the amount of $160,395.04.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion and a second for approval of this resolution. And we have both of those. Any questions? Then let's go ahead and vote. The resolution passes. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, sir.
Well, so far it's been the Kevin and Kirk show. But we're going to bring, well, you're up for one more.
I have one more, sir.
All right. Item 6 on the resolution, on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of system-wide phone upgrade for 5 Points and the airport rail stations, RFPP P50282, utilizing the State of Georgia contract. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, sir. This is a request to, for approval to enter into a contract, next slide, please, with W.W. Granger Incorporated to purchase phones that will be then installed at airport, station, and 5 Points. We began a program of replacing the rail phones that are out at the station, so the customer-facing, the security phones, the wayside phones throughout the system. We have a plan to roll it out across all 38 stations, but this is an initial request for the first 2 stations at Airport and 5 Points. This request, next slide please, will provide us the hardware, the physical phones that we'll be utilizing at those stations. You'll see it's a total of 130 phones in the amount of $342,557.19. Since we're utilizing the Georgia State contract for pricing on this, there is no DVE target that has been assigned. And as well, in this industry, there is minimal DVE participation for this type of equipment.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion and a second for approval of this resolution. Properly moved and seconded. Discussion. I will say I'm really glad my phone doesn't cost as much as these phones cost.
Are these, Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
are
Floyd.
these phones obsolete? Does that mean they're not working now?
So it's the age of the system. These devices were installed 30 plus years ago, and so it's a combination of both the physical phones themselves, the wear and tear that they take being out in a public environment, as well as the wiring. Today's request is simply a purchase of the phones, but we have a program where we'll be replacing the wiring and the phones throughout the entire system.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
So no longer rotary dial, Bill. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and vote. The resolution passes. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, sir.
Greg Patterson, come break the K streak, and please give us a briefing on the fiscal year 23 third quarter financial highlights and financial performance indicators as of the end of March.
It would be my delight to do so. Good morning, Chair Durrett, Vice Chair Williamson, and Mr. Greenwood, members of the Business Management Committee. I am pleased to present MARTA's financial highlights for the third quarter ending March 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. At a high-level summary of the month-over-month changes, MARTA's year-to-date budgeted surplus drops from about $54 million to $46 million. This is because the month of March is one of 2 months where, in the fiscal year, where we have higher expenditures planned in the pay period because we have 3 pay periods in those particular months. But the overall budget was straight-lined across the 12 months, so that's why you see that budgeted surplus drops a little bit just during this month alone. The positive takeaway, though, is that our actual year-to-date surplus is still $1 million higher than what we had in February. On the capital side, the takeaway is that we saw a monthly source increase of $25.8 million from a budgeted $30.6 million increase, and we saw $32.3 million in monthly uses from a budgeted $54.8 million increase. Next slide, please. So moving on to the operating budget. Next slide. At a summary level, our year-to-date performance on revenues is $23 million favorable to budget, with expenses at $19 million favorable to budget. The net of this is that we're sitting at a total of $87 million actual surplus. Our budgeted surplus at this point in the year was $46 million. Next slide, please. Breaking that summary down by category, there's a few places that I'd like to highlight. On the revenue side, we continue to see favorable results in our sales tax and ad valorem over our budget. The reason we've seen that, to reiterate, it's the same we've had in the other quarters, but because Atlanta's had a pretty robust economy and still been seeing a lot of good transactions, and the impact of inflation, which caused the prices to go up, we saw more sales tax revenue as a result of that. So that's what you're seeing reflected in those figures. In addition, we've also seen some continued ridership growth above the budgeted amount, and that's very good news. So as a result, we're sitting at $7 million favorable in passenger revenues over what we had originally budgeted. As I've mentioned in some of our previous meetings, the $3.9 million you see in other revenues, that's driven from the alternative fuel rebate. We did not originally budget at the beginning of the fiscal year because we weren't sure if they were going to renew that program. The program was renewed, so we were able to take advantage of it. And that's what you see there. So then on the expenses side, we can see the cumulative impact of our vacancies in the form of $26 million favorable in salaries and wages, as well as the $15.5 million favorable in benefits. Those same vacancies, though, have driven up some of our overtime expenses, which is why we see $2 million unfavorable balance there. Contractual services are $7 million favorable to budget due to a combination of station cleaning contract delays and a reduced demand for a number of small temporary external contracts. This was offset somewhat by an increased demand for contracted paratransit services, specifically in the last month, which you'll get to see a little more on the month-over-month changes coming up ahead. Also, I'll note that materials and supplies are favorable by $2 million due to lower than forecasted prices for fuel and supplies for track and structures. Next slide, please. Let's see here. Moving on to the March operations performance, our revenues are favorable to budget by $2 million. Expenses are favorable to budget by $7 million. It's for a net favorable impact of around $9 million over budget. Now, the actual impact results in $1 million of actual revenue to expenses. You can see that in the actual column. Next slide. So specific to the month of March, you'll see a similar pattern to what you saw in the year-to-date data. On the revenue side, sales tax and ad valorem continue to show $1.2 million favorable to budget. That's from that same impact we said, the healthy economy and the impact of inflation. Passenger revenue is $500,000 favorable to budget. Of note, this month, we actually saw an increase in bus ridership that contributed to this, so I'll get to show that in the KPI slides coming, which is positive news. Lease income is favorable to the forecast due to the timing of some of the renewal of our telecom leases. The revenue that was anticipated for February was also recognized in March, as well as what was forecasted for March, so you're seeing the impact of both of those hitting there. On the expenses side, salaries and wages continue to be favorable due to the ongoing vacant position for March, which comes to $10 million favorable. Total benefits are favorable by $500,000 for the same reason. Overtime continues to be above the forecast, currently $700,000 unfavorable to budget. And for the month of March, we also saw that sharp increase that I mentioned earlier in demand for contracted paratransit service. It's the main reason we're unfavorable by the $3.5 million. Lastly, we did see an increase in casualty and liability reserves. That caused us to be $1.2 million unfavorable to budget in the other non-labor category. Next slide, please. All right, so for our key performance indicators, next slide, I'm pleased to note that our passenger revenues exceeded the forecast by around $500,000. This is an improvement over the prior year by about $800,000 for the month of March. Next slide. Of note here, this is where you get to see that the monthly bus ridership actually increased over the forecast for the year. So it increased by expectations by over 200,000 unlinked trips. It's the first month we've seen that high of an increase in bus ridership. So that's a positive sign of renewal. Hopefully you can continue to see that pattern. Next slide. Our rail ridership has met the forecasted ridership of around 2.6 million unlinked trips. So that actually concludes both the operating and the KPI portions of the presentation. I'm going to pinch in a little bit and dive into the capital slides. Next slide. And next slide, please. Okay, so for our capital sources and uses for state of good repair year to date, right now our sources, what we've seen of a budgeted $328 million, the actuals is $314 million. Now, one of the biggest drivers of why our actuals are under our budget here is in the federal funds area. This is because the federal funds are reimbursable in nature, so we need to have a certain amount of accrued charges in the capital program before we can reimburse for that. And so because we haven't made it as far along in our capital program as we'd like to see, that's why you see that the federal funds are a little bit lagging there as well. speaking to the uses side of it right now, of the forecasted 348 million that we would have at this point in time of the year, we're actually seeing about 150 million in the capital improvement program. And so the total uses, of including debt service right now, of a budgeted 493 million, we're sitting at 261 million year to date in the state of good repair. Next slide, please. Here you can see the top 10 projects by expenditures in the state of good repair. The top 3, of course, would be our track renovation, Phase 4, rail station rehab, and the rail car replacement. That's the new CQ400 rail cars there. I also want to note, if you're taking a look, there's a spike there in number 9, the rehab tunnel ventilation fans. That's due to an accounting error that we're currently working on correcting. So hopefully in the next round of these reports, that should be corrected, and you'll see the actual results there. Next slide, please. All right, so this is our Clayton County expansion, capital sources and uses. So of our total sources budgeted was 26.3 million. Our actuals are 27.1. And of the budgeted 9.9 million expenditures we'd expect to see year to date, we're actually at 800,000. Now, this does include, if you recall, early in the fiscal year, we had a corrective transaction to move some of the charges from the state of good repair, from Clayton County expansion to the state of good repair. That was correcting for a prior year error, but that's also why you don't see quite as much in the way of charges in the current year. Next slide, please. And this is the top 6 projects for Clayton County expansion. CPMO comes in at the highest, followed by the Clayton County O&M facility and the Justice Center Transit Hub. Also, one of the things I want to note here, that the column annual budget, that's the total annual amount expected by June 30th, whereas the actuals is reflecting the year-to-date totals. Next slide, please. And here we have our capital sources and uses for MARTA City of Atlanta. Of the total sources in the budget was 31.1 million, and we're sitting at 32.1 million of actuals. And then when it comes to our uses right now of the planned 34.1 million, we're sitting at 6.2 million in actuals.
And Greg, this is reflective of the half penny?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. And here is our top 10 projects for the MARTA City of Atlanta program. See that Summerhill BRT is the top project right now, followed up by 5 Points Station Transformation and Campbellton BRT. And again, you're seeing the annual budget in that right column, which is the total planned spend for the year, and the actuals is the year-to-date that we've seen so far. Next slide, please. That concludes my update on the financial highlights.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions or comments?
Jacob? Perfect. Thank you for the update. Very helpful. 2 questions. One, on the ridership, awesome to see the spike upward. That's exactly what we want to be seeing. Just a quick question on like the revenue piece. So when I look at February 2023, we see revenue of 7 million, which is the highest we've seen, which is great to see. But ridership in February is much lower than other months. Like, what drives the variance there?
So thank you for the question. So when it comes to what the variance is between those 2 items, there can be an analysis of where you have store trips that we understand can be then recognized at a certain point in time, so we can recognize the revenue, but we can recognize that from a revenue standpoint, but not necessarily the ridership that goes with that at times.
Thank you. And then just secondly, on looking at the capital program on the Atlanta side, just 2 questions there. One, surprised to not see like the PMO being one of the large expenses here, like it is in Clayton. It's big within the program. Is there a reason? Is it a timing piece that we're just not seeing it year to date, or we'll let this here?
To be blunt, I'd have to actually research that a little more before I could give you a straight answer on that. I wouldn't want to answer that without looking into it myself.
Okay, no problem.
But I'll take a note to do so.
What is PMO?
Yeah, so, and just a clarifying piece on that question. So if you, like, central PMO is generally managing the overall program, so not just project. And
Okay.
given the size of
I
the
see what you're
program,
talking
surprised not to see it as one of the top ones.
Jacob, is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill?
We're getting ready to have a meeting on the budget for next year. This is a fiscal year number. You say year end, you're talking fiscal. You just
Yes, sir.
keep my simple mind straight. That ends in June, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A budget next year, and then this budget has stimulus funds. Will the next year budget have stimulus funds?
It will not. So right now, as of June 30th is when we expect to fully draw down the American Rescue Plan Act stimulus funding, and we'll close out that grant by September 30th. But we are not budgeting that specific one in fiscal year '24 because it sunsets at the end of '23.
Okay, so we should expect then some discussion about how we're going to, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with that? Am I reasonable in thinking that how are we going to deal with the loss of this money that we've been, is that or does it just go away and we just move on like we've never had a problem?
So the short answer is yes, it goes away, but I think the larger answer is we will be having a discussion on how we make up for the difference. And that's included in some of the planning and developing of that budget.
Okay, and the last question has to do with sales tax revenues. It looks to me like every year, every month, we look at sales tax revenues, and they're a little bit higher than we budgeted and anticipated. What are the expectations now on sales tax revenues in the state of Georgia on a month-to-month basis per the budget that we're in right now?
So the budget we're in right now, and I cannot recall off the top of my head when the specific revenue forecast came in for the budget we're in right now, but we do receive an annual refresh from the Georgia State University Economic Forecasting Center's forward forecast that goes 30 years out, month by month in the upcoming fiscal year on what they believe our sales tax revenue forecast is going to be. And that's what we had based our budget off of on sales tax revenue then. We have now since received another one, I believe that was as of January 30th of this year that we used, and we're using that to baseline and forecast the 2024 budget from that one.
So we're not anticipating a loss of revenue from the budget standpoint on sales tax?
Overall,
in this fiscal
I'm sorry,
year?
excuse me. For this fiscal year, no, we're not expecting a drop-off. And then for the next fiscal year, I believe, and I'd have to go back and look at the data, there was a brief few months where it dips down a little bit, but then overall, the sales tax forecast is an increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rod?
A quick question. Again, a great job on the surplus going into the last quarter of the fiscal year. How does this projected surplus compare to the surplus that we had in fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2021? And how does that impact our cash position?
So it will be a higher surplus than we saw in those previous fiscal years. As far as the cash position, we have a higher amount of cash as well, which, I'm going to speak a little bit, and I ask Kevin to speak in, but this is also part of what that cash position allowed us to have the bonding opportunity that we saw recently.
So yeah, Kevin.
Yes, Mr. Mullis, it's creating a surplus of sales tax that is being utilized to fund our reserves that will be used in the discussion on how we're going to handle the ARP funding being consumed and what we're going to utilize to fill those gaps to buy us some time going forward. But yeah, it's going back into our reserve accounts. It is another significant surplus that we're projecting for the end of the year.
So the CARES Act may have done what it was intended to do, give us a glide path to we can, as we build our ridership up?
It's yes, sir. That's the method. That's what MARTA is using it for. Obviously, our financial health has been better than a lot of transits who needed the CARES Act just to get through the year. The CARES Act and the ARP Act allowed us to build reserves that would buy us the time for ridership to come back. And that's really because of the fiscal health that we've been in, and obviously getting the AAA rating, it plays a significant role in that as well.
If I can remember correctly, we were somewhere north of $170 million of a surplus in fiscal year 2020.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. This year will be less, but it's still significant we're
we're trying to
thinking
get to close to 100 million.
close to 100 million. Yes, sir, I believe so.
And that goes into our cash reserve, not into our CIP funds, is that right?
Well, it'll go into the cash reserves that could be utilized to fund operations or capital at some point in the future. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, so, and we have a delta from an operational standpoint of about $40 million from where we're budgeting for expenses and where actuals are coming in, is that?
In
In expenses, not on the revenue side, on expenses.
Yes, sir. Currently, we're underperforming our expense budget by 40 million or whatever was shown in the slides here.
So you could give us a chart or graph or something that says how much if we could supplement to get the ridership where we need to be, how many years we can buy with that reserve, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think that's part of the discussion that we'll be having at the May 9th board retreat.
Yeah.
It'll show us what those surpluses are going from historic, and then what the deficits are in the next 2 or 3 years, and how we're applying those surpluses to fill those deficits until ridership comes back.
Fantastic job, team.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Blakely, I apologize. I can't see the light on your, and I didn't know to look down here to see that you'd hit your button, so it's your turn.
No worries, thank you. Mr. Mullis actually asked one of my questions, so thank you. And the other one was just in regards to the operations piece, kind of tagging off of what Jacob had asked. The increases in ridership for the paratransit as well as the bus ridership, is there any indication of what actually triggered those increases?
I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I would have to speak a little bit more with the bus ops team and find out if there's any pattern that they have recorded on it.
I can take some of that. In terms of the mobility piece, that has been increasing steadily over the past year. So it's not a surprise to us that it's continued to increase. It's largely owing to the fact that MARTA's been able to supply for that demand. So, you know, there was a point during COVID when the majority of our mobility riders were concerned about transmission of the disease, and were really, they had taken a real dip. But as we started to come out of that and opportunities became more obvious to them, and our paratransit service never shut down, that was really the leading piece of ridership amongst our 3 modes at one point. So it's rapid return. In terms of buses return, we're grateful. We like to believe that it's because we continue to do those things and communicate to the public that our maintenance has never stopped. Our disinfection programs were public and not just done in private anymore. We did them out on the site. Our MARTA Heroes campaign continued to say we're still here and we're working. The cleanliness factor continued. You know, just the fact that we were able to continue providing that service throughout the pandemic. We continue to lead that ridership by coming out of our essential services plan as quickly as we could, by returning the Saturday schedule to regular schedule as quickly as we could. So, you know, we like to believe that it's all of these things that are giving our bus riders confidence that the service is there for them. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say a lot of it, too, is the fact that as a state, we remained open. So the places they wanted to go, the jobs they wanted to get to, the educational, all those things were open. And so that it's a slow curve. Most of our transit agencies across the nation have acknowledged that it's a slow curve. But in our case, we're further ahead because we started ahead with more businesses being open. So as Greg has said, I think that we're hopeful that this trend continues, but we can't take full credit for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Greg, thank you for your report.
Thank you very much.
The last item on the agenda is other matters, information only, the letter of intent to utilize the state of Georgia contract to procure the station phones. Anything else to come before this committee? All right, the meeting is adjourned, and we will set up for the next committee meeting.
is the approval of the March 30th, 2023 minutes. Can I get a motion and a second? Properly second and moved and seconded. I'd like to call for the vote. Motion has passed. Item number 2, the resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with the city of Brookhaven, Georgia, for planning and coordination assistance for the Top End I-285 Express Lanes project. Ms. Melissa Mullinex.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Greenwood, members of the Planning Committee. I'm here today to ask for your consideration of a resolution that authorizes an IGA with the city of Brookhaven for work to be done through the Peachtree Gateway Partnership in support of our Top End 285 transit work. You will remember maybe almost a year ago that we signed an MOU with GDOT, the Atlanta Regional Commission, ATL, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, and Gwinnett counties to advance this work. And after that signing, of course, we have, the board authorized last month a planning contract for that work with CDM Smith along the Top End. And the ARC decided in the last year that they wanted to support public engagement sort of deeply within the impacted cities across the Top End, all of the various CIDs. These are elected officials, at the state level, city, county, school board, in Gwinnett, Cobb, DeKalb, other places that we don't have deep relationships. And so the ARC has put $200,000 of their federal money into this project and transferred it to MARTA. And so we would like to add $50,000 to that for a 2-year contract or IGA with Brookhaven to do this work. And that's what we are here today to ask for your support on. Happy to take any questions.
Madam Chair,
Upcoming. Yes, Mayor Floyd.
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote. The group that I work with, Pendleton Consulting, has a contract with the Peachtree Gateway Partnership for administrative support. So we work with them closely on a lot of stuff. So I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Thank you, Mayor Floyd. Did I vote on the screen pop? It's been, the motion's been moved and seconded. Discussion. First up, we have Mr. Durrett.
Thank you. You know how to use that. Melissa, is the $50,000 there because we believe it's needed to do the whole thing, or is it there as a match for the $200,000 coming from ARC?
It's there because we think that's the amount needed to do the work over 2 years, so it's $125,000 over 2 years. It's money, the $50,000 is money that we would otherwise spend either through the $14 million contract that you guys authorized with CDM Smith, or we would do with our staff and having to hire additional people.
Okay, thank you. I think this is great.
Mr. Mullis?
I'd like to state that I'm in strong support of this resolution. I think it helps us build a relationship with Cobb and Gwinnett County and provide transit service to them. So I'm a little confused, though. It says 250, but it's 50,000. Is that correct in the resolution? Am I reading the right resolution?
It's actually 250 because ARC sent over 200 to us because they can't, they couldn't transfer it to Brookhaven or to the Peachtree Gateway Partnership.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vaughn?
Just confirm, MARTA is the project manager for this work, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So with the, I understand the city of Brookhaven is leading this. So what exactly will the role of the Peachtree Gateway partnership, what exactly will their
Right.
role be?
Their role will be to for this work. I mean, they're a existing nonprofit. But for this work, what they will be doing is they will be building essentially the database of all of the impacted cities and governmental entities of the major stakeholders and developers all along top in 285. We mentioned in the resolution just those 4 big DeKalb cities because this is a DeKalb city that we're doing the IGA with, but it's really from Smyrna all the way over. And then we'll, of course, go north into Gwinnett, since they're a signatory to this partnership. They'll be building this database of all these people and then facilitating the distribution of all of the materials that get developed and education. They'll be pulling the questions back up. They will be, I think the word is soft sounding the funding strategies, what might work, because this project will require a new funding strategy.
Okay, gotcha. And then also in the resolution, it mentions that, where is it? That the IGA will establish roles and responsibility for each entity. Has that moved any? Have they gotten any traction with that?
Yes, we, and Peter and Jonathan may want to speak to this. We have a fully developed scope in the IGA, as I just sort of described in big picture. Brookhaven has a new city attorney in Jeremy Berry, and there's some conflict issues, and he's got to find conflict counsel to help to finish the final negotiation on the IGA.
Okay.
Jeremy in his private firm has also represented MARTA on multiple projects.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, my notes. Are there any additional questions? Let us vote. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Mullins.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, is a briefing for the Cleveland Avenue and Metropolitan Parkway Aerial Rapid Transit ART project by Mr. Larry Prescott. Larry?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Rod Millis, Mr. Greenwood, committee, gallery. As stated, I'm going to be briefing today on the Cleveland Avenue and Metropolitan Parkway Arterial Rapid Transit project. Next slide, please. So what is Arterial Rapid Transit, ART? Not to be confused with Picasso or Rembrandt. This is an enhanced rapid bus service. It operates within our existing streets with reduced limited stops, as well as transit signal prioritization. All this is done to help improve the ridership, the bus ridership experience overall. So it's very similar to bus rapid transit, the BRT, except there are no dedicated lanes. So next slide. So per Amendment 15, these were 2 separate projects, but after review in the planning phases, we decided to combine them both for economy and schedule increasing. So Metropolitan ART is the gold line running north-south. It's the bus route 95 alignment from the west end over to Metropolitan Parkway down to the Cleveland Avenue, the little loop there on the left across just north of the Walmart complex there. Cleveland ART runs from the East Point Station east and west all the way over to Jonesboro Road and follows the bus route 78. Next slide, please. So overall, these are 2 projects combined, but the funding will remain separate. The portions that are in the more MARTA Atlanta program will be funded separately from the locally funded portions within East Point. This is the first ART within the Metropolitan Atlanta area, and part of that both of those are 5 miles for each one of these alignments, 10 miles round trip. We will be for lanes, 55 enhanced bus stop locations, 5 mid-block crossings for safety enhancement. Next slide, please. So looking at these enhanced stops, you can see there's a marker pylon that will be ART specific branded with a solar panel on top to provide power for both the lights and the amenities within the shelter. The shelter itself will be branded as well, similarly for ART specifically. It will have the benches, and we'll also have the auto AV for real-time arrival bus information. We'll have our bike pass, the MARTA bike pass, as well as a little bit of expansion on the easy access, the platform area there will be expanded to as well. The next slide. At the stations themselves, we will have this enhanced special kiosk that will also have the AV real-time information for the buses and kind of be the link to the ART within the station. Next slide. Current status, we're in the middle of 90%, moving on 100% design real soon as we're trying to wrap up the utility coordination for this long corridor. We're completing a phase 1 environmental site assessment. Again, the history on these corridors is there, a lot of risk mitigation that we're working through. Right-of-way is working on around 66 properties right now for those 55 different stops that we have going. And as we prepare for the construction contractor selection, we're going to have an industry day next month to drum up business and kind of explain to everybody what we're doing and how we're doing it and kind of get a good outreach to everybody. The bus shelters, they will be procured separately and provided to the contractor. We want to maintain consistency with the branding and the type of shelters that we get with this. So next slide. So cost-wise, we're looking at $30 million for the construction. $8 million of that will come out of the local funding for the East Point portion. Overall cost around $46 million total. So like I said, we're looking to wrap this up hopefully the end of next month, move into procurement of construction, have that construction last around 15 months with a revenue service date of May of 2025. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Are there any questions? Mr. Durrett?
Larry, when I look at, this is great, fantastic. So this isn't a criticism, but when I'm looking at some of these images about, the stops and that sort of thing, nothing about the design I'm seeing here, and it may be because you can't see detail or anything, nothing screams out to me, special, different, come try this, because you're going to be on existing bus routes where we're going to continue doing the local service there. But are we confident that what we're going to get is going to have that special pop that I'm hoping people will recognize?
Thanks for asking. Yes, right now the branding is in full-blown processing with the BRT branding as well. So the two of those will be coming out real shortly. We didn't want to project anything right now, so we wanted to keep it a little bit generic until we're able to bring that out and do it and then unveiling all at once. So the ART, BRT will come out together and be, like you said, standalone.
Is it possible, are we considering calling them something other than ART, BRT, and let's get away from
Yes.
the alphabet?
Yeah, we absolutely are, and there's been a lot of conversation inside MARTA, along with some contracted folks to brand this service. And so the idea is, especially in the case of BRT, this bus rapid transit, that seems to be a sticking point for people. So it's really going to focus on the results of the experience, not the mode itself. So more to come on that without giving it away. You'll see that.
Mr. Pollard?
Jim answers most of my questions, but going back to the station design themselves, and I saw the kiosk, but could you kind of summarize what are these stations, what will they look at? Will it be just the kiosk or some expanded shelter? Or?
We're going to take the 10-foot standard length and extend it to 16 feet. So to have a little bit more bench space, a little bit more ADA accessible, and they'll have that auto-visual display up there that will keep real-time information going with it, as well as the pylon marker that will be there to kind of designate where that's at. So the the new shelter, the new shelter will have the bike racks that we have downstairs in front of headquarters right here, the multicolored ones. Again, a little bit more color pop to that.
So the shelters basically be expanded shelters
Yes.
like we see today?
Yes.
Mr. Mullis?
What's your ridership in these two quarters now, and what's the timeline to get from endpoint to endpoint, station to station?
That's a planning question. I'll have to get back to you on that one because definitely it has increased, and that's why we're going to the ART. These enhanced stops are going from the 55, there's 20-something on each one of them, and that's about half of what's out there now. So trying to consolidate and hit the key areas. So I don't know the exact numbers right now, but we can get that to you.
Okay, but we anticipate this
Yes.
will increase demand for the service?
Yes, definitely.
Almost.
It's already on the rise, but this will help increase it.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hardish?
I'm sure you have a plan, but I'm always asking,
Yes.
what are we doing with trash pickup? Who's responsible for picking up trash at these stations?
That's the standard out front advertising that we use through that. They come out and pick that up. And
Do we have an issue in that area? I know it's some of our different areas, there's an issue with that, and I just don't want us to build these nice new
Yes,
areas
yes,
and
that
they
is
get trashed up.
that is a point of emphasis with this one because, again, similar to the BRT that we're doing in Summerhill, we are enhancing that program to make sure that it's a more frequent, so to speak, cleanup.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Oh, sorry. How many stops are we eliminating here? How many ART stops on a 10-mile route will there be, and how many are there now?
There's 55 total, so it's almost an even split between the two, and we're eliminating about half because we're consolidating them in some of the areas of non-use or lack of use. So it's about half. So
Half of them,
the
okay.
25-ish goes down. Like Metropolitan right now is around 50, and we're taking it down to around 25.
Okay, but some of the questions that were asked, the buses, is there, I mean, are you planning on putting somebody at these stops where the buses don't stop to tell them, don't worry, there's another bus coming?
Oh, yes.
You know, because you're not, they're not trying to wave them down or something like that.
Correct.
Looks like a problem to me, but there's a way to differentiate, which I guess you're getting to in this branding thing.
As part of the bus refresh program that's coming out next year, that will be built into this.
Okay,
So
I
there
think
will be the outreach associated with it.
Okay, I'm real good at picking paint colors and branding, so if you need some help on this, just let me know, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. That seems to include all the questions. Are there any other matters to come before this committee?
Thank you.
Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we please vote? Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a modification in the contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio antenna sites. And that'll be led by Eric Brim.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Chief Crayer, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Eric Brim, and I'm the manager of the Radio Communications Systems. I am a first-time presenter on behalf of my director, Doug Miller. May I direct your attention to the agenda item as mentioned. Number 2, this is a resolution authorizing the modification of a contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio antenna sites, L40123. These antenna sites provide routine radio communication coverage for bus, rail, mobility, MARTA Police Department, and work centers across the authority. Additionally, emergency radio coverage group users include MARTA Police, regional police departments, GBI, FBI, Federal Air Marshal Service, and regional fire departments. Next slide, please. The listed items are related to the radio system upgrade, which is in progress. I will speak to these areas, explain why the funding is needed, and present the resolution for approval. Next slide, please. The requested resolution authorizes the general manager or delegate to continue to pay existing radio tower lease agreements by adding additional authorized funds in the amount of $251,210.48 for a total authorization of $4,940,975.59. This authorization is being funded with local operating funds included in the approved FY 2023 budget. Funds for the subsequent fiscal year will be included in subsequent annual budgets. Next slide, please. There are currently 4 communication tower locations that support MARTA Radio Communications Network. They provide critical mobile radio communications coverage and support data transmission for the bus, mobility, and automatic vehicle location system. These tower sites are strategically positioned at Stone Mountain, Union City, Alpharetta, and Georgia Pacific. They provide the current coverage of our service area. As part of the radio system upgrade project approved last year, 2 additional tower sites are being added at Ravinia to improve coverage in the North Fulton area and Panhandle to improve coverage in Clayton County. This is the final phase of the conversion of the P25 interoperability digital standard. As you may recall, this will allow all first responders to communicate in emergency situations. Next slide, please. The existing tower sites are leased per existing agreements in place with options until 2027. Funding is being added for the new sites. This payment authorization was originally approved by the board in 2017 and updated last year. This item formalized the lease funding into a payment authorization managed by procurement. This action added additional fiduciary controls and provides increased fiscal oversight. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion did not add a line item due to lack of DBE opportunities. This item is an increase in authorization, and there are no DBE considerations. Next slide, please. I am requesting the committee recommend the full MARTA board, this resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for the payment of lease agreements for radio tower sites in the amount of $251,210.48 Chairman Pond, I will now turn it back over to you for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. You survived your first presentation. So. Very well.
Thank
Could I
you.
get a motion and second, please? All right. Any questions? I have one for clarification, and just to confirm. These towers are owned by others, and they have multi-tenants and multi-users, and we're leasing these towers. But are they the same owner, or are there multiple owners with this?
Multiple owners. Each tower site, I believe 2, Alpharetta and Union City, they're under one owner, and all the rest are separate owners, individual owners.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Could we please vote? Good. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. The next item is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for consulting services for the Department of Operations, and that'll be led by Daniel Heck, Deputy Chief Mechanical Officer. Daniel?
Hey, good morning, Chair Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Chief Creer, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Daniel Hecht. I'm the Deputy Chief Mechanical Officer. This is a contract for consulting services for the Department of Operations L50343. Next slide, please. The purpose of this contract is to provide professional management consulting services for MARTA Operations Division Management in 4 key task areas. In the interest of developing our employees and putting people first, we want to develop our leaders to improve performance and focus on customer enhancements. This is all aligned toward our goal of continuous improvement in operations and performance-based management on KPI adherence, along with time standard implementation. We want our staff clearly aligned with MARTA's goals, vision, and priorities, mainly to consistently provide excellence in customer service. Next slide, please. So about Argo Consulting, they've done work for MARTA before. They did a EP&E, the Electric Power and Equipment Group. They did a mini assessment of them a few years ago. They had recommended improvements such as pulse meetings and work scheduling improvements that we still have in place today in the EP&E group. They also did a full assessment of bus operations management in late 2022, focused on the organizational structure. And this is guiding our bus improvement initiatives and leadership development on the bus side. Continuing this assessment within operations keeps the analysis consistent across the division and provides a steady baseline on which C-Team and executive management can make decisions on our direction. Argo specializes in transportation. They have real-world experience from the industries they serve, hard skills focused on the shop. They've been out there, they've worked in transit. They focus on railways, transit design service, lean applications, which is of particular importance in mechanical operations. They have technical expertise on productivity enhancements and results-oriented leadership. Next slide. So I mentioned Argo has done 2 tasks for MARTA already, the EP&E mini review and the bus management review in 2022. This contract is for 4 tasks. The first is a rail management review, which will follow the same format as the bus management review. A review of bus maintenance time standards, a review of operator certification program, and a revisit of the EP&E improvements that were implemented a few years ago. Next slide. So task 1 is the rail management review. This is a assessment using Argo's 9-box tool. It's basically a SWOT analysis. They will complete a gap analysis between the current state and the should-be state of rail management. At the end of this, there will be a report on leadership traits, characteristics, and opportunities, and recommendations on operational changes within rail. There's about 60 mid-level managers in the rail maintenance or rail operations department that's going to be subject to this review. Next slide. Task number 2 is the bus time standard study. This is a productivity measure for bus maintenance to ensure maintenance is right-sized. This includes a review of maintenance practices, a comparative analysis, and standard development. A big portion of this is going to be implementation of time standards into the enterprise asset management system. That's the computer system that we use to track all maintenance. And then we will also develop efficiency measurements and reports on time standard adherence in bus maintenance. And this is a direct outcome of the bus assessment that they did in 2022. This is one of those high priority areas they said MARTA should focus on, so we are going to continue with those recommendations. Next slide, please. Task 3 is a technical training assessment focused on the operator recertification process. Now, MARTA did an internal deep dive audit into our recertification program, and while we found no major issues or concerns, we are looking for an independent analysis and recommendations for program changes. This is safety critical and has national attention right now. And task 4, as I mentioned earlier, is a revisit of the EP&E improvements that were done a few years ago. Really, we want to determine what stuck and what was lost within the EP&E group, and how can MARTA improve not just on the EP&E initiative, but all of these management initiatives. Next slide, please. At the end of these 4 task items, the board can expect myself or one of my peers to come back with a briefing at the conclusion with actions MARTA is taking based on the results of these assessments and improvements. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion did not assign a DB&E goal to this professional services letter of agreement. That said, Argo has a subconsultant working on this project named Code Red Business Solutions. They are New York MTA Small Business Enterprise and DBE certified. They've used these DBEs anywhere from 20 to 60% of contract value on prior assessments that mirror these. And they are based in Atlanta. So we will ensure that Argo and any of their subconsultants get with Paul and Nash to see if there's opportunities for them to become a DBE here at MARTA. And internal audit is conducting a price analysis to determine fair and reasonable pricing. In closing, the Department of Mechanical Operations respectfully requests authorization for the resolution to enter into an agreement with Argo Ifeso Consulting for up to $640,000 for a 3-year contract for professional management consulting services and maintenance time standard implementation. I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Daniel. Could we have a motion and a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions for Daniel? Mr. Heck? Mr. Durr?
You said that this is being analyzed for appropriate cost. Is there any expectation why they would determine that it is not and that it's excessive, as we are already deciding to pass this on to the full board?
No, there's no expectation that it's going to be unreasonable pricing. This follows the pricing that they did for our other assessments as well, so we're just checking to make sure that everything is squared away.
Thank you, Daniel.
Point of clarification, the 650 is the maximum that you would be allowed to.
That is correct. $640,000, up to $640,000.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Could we please vote?
No, my light is on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. It's listed as professional management consulting in 4 key areas, but I only see 3 listed.
Is that in the procurement agenda report?
On page 5, under purpose.
Can we go back to slide 3, please? One more back, please. This is the purpose of why MARTA wants to do this. This is really about professional management consulting for leadership development and BUS. If we go forward 2 slides, please. Here's the 4 contract tasks: rail management review, time standard study, operator recertification review, and the revisit of the EP&E.
Right, that was on a separate slide. I believe that's page 7 here on my screen anyway. It does list, but under the purpose where it says professional management consulting in 4 key areas: leadership development, continuous improvement, and performance-based management. So basically you're saying it's really the 4 that's listed on page 7?
Correct. Yeah, that's the 4 areas that Argo is going to be doing the assessments in. Big picture, MARTA is endeavoring on this entire program in the interest of leadership development and continuous improvement.
Right. I was concerned because I saw that under contract task, and so.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Heck? Could we please vote? Motion passes.
Thank you.
The next item is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for a procurement of portable restroom trailers utilizing a federal GSA contract. And that'll be led by Sean Thomas. Sean?
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Chief Crair, and Operations and Safety Committee members. My name is Sean Thomas. I'm the Director of Facilities, and if I may, I would like to bring your attention to agenda item number 4. And this is a resolution authorizing award of P50305 for the procurement of portable restroom trailers utilizing the current Federal General Services Administration contract agreement. Next slide. For context of this agenda item, I will discuss the following key topics, providing a background of the issue, a proposed solution, an overview of the product, financial considerations, and a recommendation. Next slide. Why are we here? The authority has undertaken several projects to renovate existing restrooms in our stations and garages. Traditionally, these type of improvement efforts include rental of portable restrooms, as you see pictured here. This temporary solution was widely accepted in the past, and we're quite simply seeking to improve upon past practices with a safer, more sanitary solution to improve, to support the improvements at our operating facilities. And it's also worth noting that we've in the 4 years ago, I think in 2019, we purchased a single restroom trailer to support some of these type efforts, and now this solution was looking to further expand upon that. Next slide. So the solution itself is us seeking to purchase 5 portable restroom trailers, similar to the image here. Each unit would have 3 stalls, 1 ADA stall, and 2 standard size stalls. And you can see the differences in each of the 3 stalls in the bottom picture. And each of these trailers would include the modern comforts of the stationary restrooms within our facilities. In addition to the wheelchair ramp accessory, which you see to the left, there's also a kneel feature which lowers the trailer closer to the ground for easier wheelchair access. Again, this solution will not only support renovation efforts being led by the Office of Facilities, but also those led by our capital programs teams for station rehab, garage and restroom, locker room projects, as well as various special events or emergency outages such as water main breaks, watershed upgrades by different municipalities, etc. Next slide. So for some context of the financial impact, we've tried to put this together to demonstrate some of the rental costs associated with the project during the first phase of the smart restroom effort in our stations over the past fiscal year. And moving forward for the remaining sites, we came up with the estimate if we continue with that same approach, we would exceed $700K in rental fees associated with supporting this effort. Next slide. In summary, the Office of Facilities is seeking authorization to award contract P50305 in the amount of $415,000 for the purchase of 5 ADA plus 2 restroom trailers. With this in mind, I respectfully request authorization to award P50305 to J&B Lux Labs LLC. Back to you, Chairman Pond.
Thank you, Sean. Could we have a motion and a second? Okay. Moved by Hardy, second by Williamson. Any questions for Mr. Thomas? Yes.
Quick question. So at the end of the cycle for these porta potties, which are very nice, by the way, what happens to them? Like, are they recycled? Do we sell them back to the manufacturer, or what happens?
Great question. So our intent right now is to continue using them because the projects itself for a smart restroom is going to go through several years, and because of some of the different emergencies that we've encountered in the past in different municipalities, we feel like we could definitely support continuing to use them to support the authority.
So then in terms of maintenance, like, I'm not familiar with how the rental contract will work versus purchase, but I would think with the rental, they will be responsible for maintenance and things like that. So with us purchasing them, are we responsible for maintenance, or?
Yes, yes, ma'am. So the one good example that we have is literally just a few months before the pandemic started, we purchased a single trailer, and my team has maintained that trailer as the same way that we would these additional 5, and it's still in service right now, and it was actually out in the system during the early phases of the smart restroom project because we wanted to get away from the quote-unquote porta potties and put something a little bit more hygienic out for our patrons to use in the system. So this was the best solution that we had.
And is the maintenance cost factored into this $400,000? Or no?
No, ma'am, because the $400K is just for the purchase. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Thomas?
I have one.
Sure. Ms. Scott?
Just a quick question regarding observing. Have we looked or surveyed whether or not it's important to have a diaper changing station or a place available in our restrooms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally have not looked into it, but I do know there were a few places where we did try that. I have to look into it a little bit more to figure out how well received it was among some of our patrons. But I can definitely look into it to find out more information.
Thank you. And the reason why I'm asking is because having ridden the train quite a bit lately, I've seen so many strollers and those with with babies and strollers, and I just wondered if that had been if that was something we were observing or looking at monitoring or surveying. So thank you.
Thank
you. In the men's restroom as well.
I echo that 100%. Parity. Any other questions, Mr. Thomas? Could we please vote? The resolution passes. The next item is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for automated external defibrillators. That'll be led by Leslie Hubble, Director of Environmental Health and Safety.
I'm sorry, Chair. It was just brought to my attention that the smart restrooms that we've renovated within the past several months do have changing stations. Sorry.
You hear that, Thomas?
Hi, good morning.
I'm hoping to get mine out of diapers soon.
Okay. Well, Leslie wants to move on from diapers to her part of the program, so.
Yeah, this one you're helping, but you're starting all over.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Vice Chairman Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, Chief Crayer, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Leslie Hubble. I'm the Director of Environmental Health and Safety within the Department of Safety and Quality Assurance. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 5. This is a resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization of the automated external defibrillators contract Q43610A. Next slide, please.
So automated external defibrillators, or AEDs, are used in response to sudden cardiac arrest events. They analyze the cardiac rhythm of the patient and determine if an electrical shock should be distributed. Our AEDs have been used in at least 7 cardiac arrest events over the past 3 years. We currently have 118 AEDs across our rail stations, police vehicles, maintenance, and administrative facilities. Next slide, please. The contract is currently held by AED Brands and has a 3-year base with no options. The contract was recently extended to August 1st to ensure adequate coverage until the new contract is executed. This contract has no DBE goal because it was valued under $200,000 originally and is part of the Small Business Enterprise Program. The current contract value is $199,947.99. The contract scope includes the procurement, inspection, and maintenance of AEDs and their accessories, and includes medical oversight and return to service maintenance when these are used in a cardiac arrest event. Next slide, please. The need for this resolution is directly related to recent issues with AED theft from our rail stations. Over the last 14 months, we've lost 25 AEDs with a high of 12 this February. Next slide, please. The market cost of these stolen AEDs is around $1,800 per unit, which would be around $45,000. Our cost to replace them under our current contractual authorization is $1,575 per unit, or $28,350. In early 2022, DSQA launched a theft prevention campaign to warn potential criminals that our AEDs were under video surveillance. Unfortunately, theft has still occurred. After receiving approval from legal, Environmental Health and Safety has worked with facilities to relocate our station AEDs into our staff rooms and other equivalent secured rooms to help prevent theft. This effort was completed on April 7th. We are working with MPD to catch the culprit or culprits, and with IT to test GPS tracking devices for future use. There are also provisions for alarm and monitoring systems in our upcoming AED contract that will be executed by August 1st. We've also, in addition to our monthly inspections that we do under this contract, Station Services has recently implemented daily checks to ensure the AEDs are actually present in the stations. Next slide, please. For this contract modification, we are requesting an additional authorization of $50,865 to purchase 30 AEDs, 15 adult CPR replacement pads, and 15 AED replacement batteries. Funding is available to support this increase through local capital funds. The increase will bring the total contractual authorization to $250,812.99. Next slide, please. I respectfully request the approval of the resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization of the automated external defibrillators contract Q43610A. Thank you for your time. Chairman Pond, I'll turn it over to you for consideration.
Thank you, Leslie. Could we have a motion and a second, please? Let's see, we have a motion and a second. Moved by Worthy, second by Hardage. Questions for any discussion? Ms. Hardage?
I think Mr. Worthy had his hand up, but I do encourage you, I know there's alarms that you can buy for this because we obviously have the same issues. And while they do cost, obviously what you're losing in them is value to you to know where they are. However you want to do GPS tracking, or whether you want to, put the alarms on it. I just encourage that we pay extra to get that, because this problem will never go away until we do that.
So we do have that in our new contract.
Of course, you start discussing AEDs and the two hospital folks.
Yeah, I get it.
Our antennas go up. I will, this is off color, but there's a special place in hell for people that still steal AEDs. That's my first observation. But my second observation is I completely understand why we're putting it in staff rooms. But you know, the great things about these AEDs is they're plug and play. Anybody with no medical training can use them, and they save lives. So I think we need to be closely watched to make sure that, you know, other customers could save a customer's life with access to AEDs. And if they're running around trying to find a station attendant, that makes me nervous, but we obviously can't continue to lose expensive AEDs. So I get it, but I hope that putting them in staff rooms and secure rooms are a temporary solution to a problem and not our long-term plan.
Yeah, let me just add to that. We discussed this at large, talking about balancing the need to, you know where they are, and versus not knowing why they're not there anymore. So having lost 25 in the past year, this is the immediate step that we're taking in terms of purchasing more. We're also looking at further enhancements, such as equipping the lead cab of our trains with these kits, and with the onset of the stations program and more supervisory folks in the stations, they'll know that if the if the AED is missing, that at a minimum the next train will have one, will radio ahead and have that brought to them if they happen to not be able to get to the locked secured area in time, or even if there's not staff on board, we'll know that the people on the platform will have access coming. So we're going to continue to look at ways to improve on that situation.
Ms. Blakely?
Thank you, Chair Pond. So just to piggyback off of that, the location of these is critical, especially for our first responders. So we have to be really cognizant that, they're aware of exactly where the new locations are going to be, and as well as, if we do decide to keep them in staff rooms, that we put up signage to let the public know, hey, this is where the AEDs are, just in case of there is an emergency where a patron has a, I don't want to say responsibility, but will be willing to take that on and help another customer. And then my second question is, with the upticks in thefts of these, how is it that we have cameras and signage saying, hey, we're watching you, but we can't figure out where and who these AEDs are leaving with?
I'm going to ask Chief Creer to opine on that. He's got some comments.
Okay.
The spike, excuse me, the spike you saw in February, we have a lookout for that individual. He took several of them in a 2-day time span. We don't have him identified, but we have good pictures of him. So MPD is actively looking for him now. There is no known aftermarket that we can discover on people stealing them to make profit or to resell. A lot of the ones that we've arrested for stealing these have mental health issues. And we've had this with fire extinguishers and other things that are just out in the public. They just seem to like to collect them and take them with them. And, but we haven't found an aftermarket for these devices yet.
Okay.
But we do have a lookout for the individual from February.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Floyd?
Well, that was my question, is who buys these things? And no market, because I'd say my practical approach is to find out, is to compete in that market with them, buy them back. It might be cheaper than buying new ones.
Yeah, my first thought was that Mr. Worthy was probably buying them out of a trunk for his hospitals, but we found out
I think
it
that's
was not
something that
him.
deserves investigating. These hospital folks, if they can get them for half the price, they might be the ones.
Well,
down
and I
there.
don't know this particular I know Zoll, but I don't know, but some of them, that if after, I don't know what it is, 24 hours, if they're not in that charger, they won't work, right? And so they're dead, and they're not being of any benefit to anyone anyway, because they have to go back in their charger. Okay.
Mr. Dewar?
Yeah, Scott, I think that exactly is the sort of thing. I mean, if you go into homeless encampments, the collection of stuff there is just amazing. So maybe the city of Atlanta could be on lookout for our defibs.
I have one question, Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
How many times, do you have any statistics on how many times these are actually used in a given period?
So we know of 7 for sure.
7?
Yes.
Over
the past 3 years.
Okay.
And Chief Crayer and I have talked. There's a little bit of data that we're looking at to see if there are more. But it's at least 7 that our vendor has restored, because after they're used, they have to be pulled in and kind of refurbished before they're put back out.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Could we please vote? Oh, I'm sorry. You need to hold it up. There you go. Before we vote, Ms. Scott.
Just quickly, Mr. Durrett asked a question that brought a thought to my mind, and that is the stolen defibrillators. Have they been within a specific jurisdiction? Is it more stolen out of Atlanta, DeKalb, or has?
So primarily out of Atlanta. The majority of our thefts have been on the west side and coming down from 5 Points into like Garnett, Oakland City, that area. So we have very few thefts from, let's say, like the far east, north.
Of Clayton or?
Yeah.
So are they made of a metal that would be, for instance, I know it's not copper, but something that would be of value to sell by weight or something?
Not to my knowledge, the majority of the device is plastic. So I don't see them having a use there. They have battery packs. Ours aren't chargers, they're battery packs. Those batteries are very unique to these AEDs, so I don't see them being used elsewhere. I'm not sure what the value is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, can we please vote if you haven't? Resolution passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of health and safety and industrial hygiene consulting services, and that'll again be led by Ms. Hubble.
Yes. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 6? This is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of safety, health, and industrial hygiene consulting services, RFP P50139. Next slide, please. This RFP is a follow-on to our current A&E contract, AE 24109. The RFP will have a similar scope of services to the current contract, and these services support authority-wide environmental health and safety programs on an on-call basis. At a high level, these services include the following programs: hazardous materials, confined space, industrial hygiene, indoor air quality, biological safety, engineering controls, safety support and audits, and the laboratory services that are associated with the above work. Next slide, please. There are a variety of hazardous materials that we manage in accordance with Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or OSHA regulations. Many of the hazardous materials at MARTA are found in buildings constructed prior to 1980. These materials include asbestos, lead-based paint, mercury switches, and ballasts that contain polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs. There are other hazardous materials that we manage that come from building conditions, such as mold, sewage, and avian waste. Activities associated with these materials include conducting surveys, condition assessments, and inspections, posting the appropriate labeling and signage, and conducting abatement or remediation of the materials. The contract also provides for oversight of abatement and remediation contractors to ensure that their activities are in line with EPA and OSHA requirements. Next slide, please. This contract also supports our confined space program by conducting assessments of confined spaces and labeling them appropriately. Attributes of each space are recorded in our ArcGIS confined space database. And we conduct training for entrance attendants, supervisors, and rescue personnel. Next slide, please. This contract supports industrial hygiene services, which include conducting exposure assessments for chemicals, noise, heat, etc. These exposure assessments assist us in identifying appropriate mitigations or controls to reduce or eliminate risks to employees. We can perform personal or area air monitoring for a wide variety of chemicals or other constituents in the air. For example, we used area air monitoring during the pandemic to confirm that our ionization systems installed in vehicles and facilities were not producing hazardous byproducts. Services also include the evaluation of engineering controls and personal protective equipment to determine their effectiveness. And we conduct indoor air quality assessments and run our respiratory protection program under this contract. Next slide, please. This RFP will have a 5-year base term with 5 one-year extension options. This term is reflective of the need to continually operate these programs without disruption. The 5-year base term is valued at $12.5 million, and each option year is valued at $2.5 million. The contract will continue to work on an on-call basis, and the value factors in costs for unknown or unanticipated tasks that are inherent to these types of services. While diversity inclusion has not evaluated the terms of this contract yet, the current contract has a 25% DBE goal. Next slide, please. I respectfully request your approval of the resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of safety, health, and industrial hygiene consulting services, RFP P50139. Thank you for your time. Chairman Pond, I'll turn it over to you for consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hubble. Could we have a motion on the second? Any questions, discussion? Ms. Hardage?
Are there multiple companies that offer this service for us, that could offer this service for us?
That could, yes.
Okay, so as we go out for bid, do we currently have a contract in place?
We do.
We're just going back out to check and see what's available and if there's better opportunities?
So we are at the end of our 10-year term.
10-year, okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Quick question. Current contract, what have we spent on that contract over that 5-year period or 10-year period?
So over the 10-year period, we're approaching $13 million. The total authorization of that contract right now is $14.75 million. Over the last 3 years, we've had quite a few, as the capital program moves forward and renovates more spaces, we've had to tick up to around $2.5 million a year, which is where we ended up with this estimate.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Scott, I see you this time.
So the current 10-year contract
Expires June 30th, but we are working on an extension. Actually, I think the extension, is this all in I believe the extension's actually been executed to take us to December 31st.
of this year.
Of this year, yes.
So the current DBE goal of 25% was based upon this current contract?
So the 25% is this current contract. D&I has not evaluated, to my knowledge yet, for the new contract.
Right, and that was
Yeah.
my next question
Okay.
because it stated DBE goal to be determined.
Yes.
So based upon the new contract is when the DBE goal will be reevaluated?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So that could go up or down?
It could go up or down. Based on my experience in the market, I don't see where there would be an issue having it somewhere in the same range, but I can't speak for D&I.
So it's fair to say, though, that the current contract has met the 25% goal?
I believe we're somewhere around 28%.
Great.
Do
Thank
you?
you.
Is that right? Okay, okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is sort of a throwback Thursday for me. You're making me nostalgic for the days that I would wear full Saranac full-face respirator
Okay.
in the summer in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So thank you for taking me back to those days.
You're welcome.
Okay.
If you want to come hang out with EHS anytime, we're just,
They'll put you to work.
Yeah, Bill, the groundwater looked like orange juice. It was not very fun.
All right, any other questions, discussion? Could we please vote? Motion passes. We
Thank you.
have two items under other matters. The first item is you have the February key performance indicators, which is information only. And the second item, Daniel Heck is going to introduce the new head of mobility. I mean, I have that title exactly correct.
Yeah, good morning again. I'd like to introduce the new Director of Mobility, Richard Gonzalez, and I'll let him take a few minutes to speak about his work history and where he comes from.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, members of the committee, and Mr. Greenwood for allowing me to introduce myself. My name is Richard Gonzalez. Please call me Rick. I am the new Director of Mobility here at MARTA. I would like to especially thank Mr. Greenwood and Chief Operating Officer, Mr. George Wright, for being so welcoming and supportive during my transition into this organization. Quick background, I have spent 20 years in the field of transit. I started off at Palm Beach County's PalmTran, which is their transit agency down there in South Florida. From there, I bounced around between private industry and public, working for First Transit in various projects, found my way over to Dallas area Rapid Transit, and now I'm here at MARTA. So I've had experience in fixed route, paratransit, microtransit, and transit on demand. I'm excited to be here, and the reason I'm here is MARTA has an excellent reputation of having a safe and efficient transit service, and I'm proud to be a part of this team now. And my job here is going to be to maintain that level of excellence while at the same time working with the MARTA team to reach their goal of continuous improvement here. And so I thank you for your courtesies, and I'm happy to be aboard. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other matters to come before the committee? If not, the meeting's adjourned.
Oh, thank you. That was good.